We are here at the Freeport High School cafeteria. We moved from the library because they have AP testing set up all week in the library and didn't want to make them reset it for us. But we'll get started here. I believe Susanna is on her way. She was stuck in some traffic, but we can get started in the meantime with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the April 26th, 2023 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions? Colin, thank you. Kelly, second. All those in favor? Great, none opposed. Adjustments to the agenda?
I have a few this evening. Under number 8, reports from the superintendent, item A2, I have some more resignations to announce, and I'd like to add an A3, a retirement. Number 14, we're going to add letter 14B, consideration and approval to employer director of facilities. Item C, consideration and approval to employ a director of transportation. And item D, consideration and approval to employ a kindergarten teacher at Moore Street School. We do have some of those candidates here this evening, so I would like us to move the item 14 in its entirety up right after number 7, public comment, out of respect for those folks who are here.
Okay. All right, so we will move on to good news and recognition, and I will ask Tegan to provide our student representative report.
Okay, so as mentioned, for academics, AP testing was this week and last week, and it was also the first time we used a new program for that, an online program called Blue Book, which had a lot of mixed reviews among students. There were some computer crashes, but for the most part, it was pretty successful. Senior projects began at the beginning of this month, so most seniors are out of school and done with normal classes. This Monday, around 24 students were inducted into the National Honor Society, and there was a ceremony like right here in this cafeteria. For athletics, the Freeport High School this year is hosting the states for the track and field team, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, I believe. For visual and performing arts, a junior at Freeport High School, Minka Holtrup, won an art contest and received the Title Shift Award from the Portland Museum of Arts, as well as a hefty $2,500. For community service, the Interact Club at Freeport High School is hosting a fun day of activities for 8th graders to come to the school and just get a little more comfortable and like play games and stuff. And for awards or other news, it was Teacher Appreciation this week at school, so thank you all teachers. And prom is coming up this Saturday at the Falmouth Country Club, so a lot of students are excited for that.
A lot going on. I always feel like you're coming into the last month of school at full speed. Come crashing into June. Okay, so next on our agenda is public comment. So if we have anyone who would like to share, it looks like we have some folks here, so I will just go over our ground rules for public comment. So in order for the board to have time to fully consider and discuss the issues on our agenda, we have public comment on the agenda here and for up to 3 minutes per speaker. In order for us to hear the most folks, 3 minutes for comments. For those who have not participated in our meetings before, a few of the ground rules to ensure public comment process goes smoothly and there are no surprises. We ask you come to the podium and identify yourself with your name and your town of residence. Please try to be brief and not repeat yourself. We understand that discussion of school-related issues can be emotional, but please consider our children are watching and we are neighbors, so please be civil. Will not permit profanity, shouting at one another, comments that disparage or attack individuals or groups of individuals. Speakers should direct all comments to the board. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to the opinions of the public that relate to school and education matters. It is not a public debate or conversation, so no questions will be directed to the board, and the board will not be responding to any questions or comments if they're asked. We want to listen. The board will not permit complaints or allegations against staff members. These are personnel issues which the board is not permitted to hear in public. We do have a policy or a procedure, KEB, in place if there are complaints against staff. And if you're interested in a two-way conversation on the RSU5 website, individual emails and phone numbers are available for board members and the superintendent. So thank you for your patience as we went through those ground rules, and we'll get started. We could go through all that and then nobody wants to public comment, but that's okay. It's good to go through the process every now and again.
I'll be the first. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. My name's Nathan Ledger, and I'm a resident of Durham. And my main purpose here is just to familiarize my face to y'all, and I have a feeling that the phone calls and emails that I've been going back and forth, I feel like we're going to be having a lot more discussions from here on out. What I hold in my hand here is an agenda from last week involving a policy that on almost every single page restricts parents from their ability to have a determination or a say in their child's development. And that is so inappropriate. And so from here on out, from every Zoom call, for every meeting, for every policy, whatever discussion that has to take place, when I go through this, things like may include the parent or guardian. On the very next page, the staff will follow the student's plan. On the very next page, a student will request without parental improvement. Every single page that I go through tells me that I don't have any say in my children's development. It is inappropriate. And this policy is being filtered all through RSU5. There are many parents like me. I hope after I speak, they come back and they speak louder and louder and louder until this toxic poison goes in the trash. It's what it is. It's poison. To say that I don't have the ability to listen to my child's development and I make the decisions. Under the age of 18, you're not allowed to vote. You're not allowed to drive. You're not allowed to get a tattoo. You're not allowed to rent a car. You're not allowed to go to war like I did. You're not allowed to do a lot of things for a very, very good reason, that children are not connected to their frontal lobe like you and I are as parents and as adults. To say on each and every single one of these pages that I don't have a say in my child's development is completely inappropriate. So moving on from here on forward, I just want you to get to know me. I'm very respectful. I'm very kind. I appreciate what all of you do. I don't want your position. That's why I didn't run. But I will be an involved parent, and I'm going to get many more of people like me involved so that this never makes it into our school system. Thank you.
No.
Oh, I'll be glad. I'll be glad. Come on, give me the chance. No,
So, thank you,
thank you.
Nathan.
Thank you.
So we don't, it's public comment is just the opportunity for the public to provide us with thoughts. It's not a conversation back and forth. I'm sure we're going to hear. It sounds like he's going to be sending an email. So, yeah.
Good evening. My name is Anthony Pringle. I'm a resident of Durham and father to two younger children, a 4-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son who will soon be attending RSU5 schools. I'm here to comment, largely mirroring and in full support of Mr. Ledger's comments. Everything he said, I fully support as well, and I know we have a number of other parents who feel the same way. In addition to that, I wanted to add on a couple primary concerns about a policy that it's working its way through kind of the weeds here. I'm still relatively new to the process of how things work and how things come to pass in this form. As a parent to students haven't even arrived to the school yet, but that doesn't keep me from being concerned about what they will face when they get to their schools. And like all parents, we all want the best for them. So again, To mirror everything Nathan said, I also wanted to add on my concern about the policy related to transgender and gender expansive students that's working its way through. I have no concerns. I fully respect the wishes of other students, whatever it is they do with, on their own time, whatever it is that may be. However, as I read through here, when I consider my children, I see a lot of policy and statements in here, specifically one of the effect that all students have the right to privacy. And when I hear that, but then I see all of these certain special exemptions made for children who identify as transgender, whatever the case may be, and special policies made for them, I see nothing in the vein of all students and their right to privacy that protects the privacy of children who don't identify that way. So I say this to you as a parent of a young daughter who I'm concerned is going to come to schools like these. And again, with all respect to other students and the way that they choose to live their lives, my primary concern of mine is that my 4 or 5-year-old daughter will be exposed to adolescent boys in situations that only a few years ago we would have considered very unfitting. There are a lot of choices, like Mr. Ledger said, a lot of sexual activities, things of that nature, and in places where we've already seen these policies be implemented, you're starting to see some real serious ramifications of exposing kids of various ages and various genders in situations they've never been in before, all the way up to and including situations of rape. And we can't avoid addressing that. It has happened. It will continue to happen. It's unfortunate human nature. And if we don't consider the serious policies, this is not just simply feel good. I know that we all want to support there's expressions of themselves and all of that, but there are real serious ramifications to doing this. As a parent of a young girl, I have to consider them. So again, like Nathan said, I want to introduce myself, again, Anthony Pringle. I appreciate all of your names here. And when these policies come across your desk and you're thinking about passing these, that's fine. Pass them to protect the students who identify that way. All I ask as a concerned parent, put policies in here that protect children who don't identify this way. Those children have just as much of a right to grow up and educate themselves in a safe environment as anyone else. But right now, all I see is consideration for children who aren't the same as others. Thank you.
3 buttons, 3 minutes on the button. Thank you, Anthony. Looks like we have one more person coming up.
I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but I thought I'd introduce myself as well. My name is Ashley Schumacher. I live in Freeport, and I have a student in the Freeport Elementary School, Moore Street School specifically. I have been following this issue as well, and I had the privilege to sit in on one of the policy committee's meetings. And so I gave them feedback in email form, and I didn't have anything prepared, so I'm just going to read from that email. And find where I was. I witnessed a committee of professionals who brought knowledge, care, commitment, and intention to the table on this issue. The working draft is exactly what I hoped it would be as a parent and a member of this community. It's evident that you all are united in making sure our schools are a safe and respectful place for transgender and gender expansive students. Though I've been privileged to witness the educators in this district actively practice the spirit of the draft, putting these words down in a formal way will be an important support for the children and teens who will benefit from this carefully crafted document. So thank you all for the work that you do, and I just wanted to let you know that there are folks on both sides of this issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Ashley. Give folks a second to decide if they're okay. So thank you for the folks that spoke this evening. We always appreciate when people stand up and share their thoughts with the board. We will move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is report from the superintendent.
And we're actually going to do item 14 ahead of that tonight.
Oh, that's where we put it?
We did.
You asked me, I said fine, and then I totally forgot still. Okay, so we are going to start with 14A, yes? Okay. And I'm reading them all? Okay, just making sure. So I will start out 14A with an apology if I get your name misspelled, or not misspelled. I think they're spelled correctly, if I mispronounce your name. So, do I have motion for consideration and approval to accept the nomination of the following personnel and to authorize the superintendent to issue contracts for the 22-23 school year? Educators for second-year probationary contracts: Ann Monahan, Julia Grotchel, Henry Moser, Amanda Salve, Luke Szymanski, thank you, Mara Wiggin, Mara Dale, Jill Highland, Thomas McEwen, Peter Mills, Luke Potter, Carr Vincent, Philip Clifford, Amy Colton, Catherine Bacon, Allison Barrett, Kathleen Canali, Leah Campbell, Marissa Tario, Danielle Gauthier, Catherine Broadbent, Hannah Reedman, Kate Parkin, Sandra Braun, and Holly Hinton. And then educators for continuing contract: Amy Schmoot, Amanda Somi, Mary Beth Steiner, Samantha Andreasen, Luke Engelbert, Matthew Howard, Melissa McQuilkin, Mark Oliver, Cole Phillips, Alexander Toole, Tyler Tracy, Rosalind Moisen, Rodrigo Palacios, Megan Huckins, Brendan Boss, Jana Glynn, and Genevieve Rumsey. Susanna? Anybody need me to read them again? Beth? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Just for our new board members, the reason we do this is because the state law is that new teachers to the district are on a 2-year probationary period. So you'll see sort of those two groups of teachers after their first year here, and then after they finish their second year, that second group is continuing contract, which means then they're covered by the union contract that we have in place. So this is obviously not all of our teachers. This is just the teachers that are moving from year 1 to year 2, and then from year 2 to continuing contract. Is that correct? Got it right? Great. Any other questions?
So I read and
Ben.
I read and reread that email that Joan sent, that was sent to us about the hiring practices, and nowhere in that, I looked it up on the state website as well, talks about we can't meet the teachers and people that we're hiring through this goes to the discussion that we had at the last meeting about,
Yeah.
I don't know who these people are.
So these people are already teachers. These
Okay.
are existing teachers. This is not new to the district. These are people who are finishing their first year and finishing their second year. They've already been hired.
So, but once again, I'm not nominating people that I have no idea who they are. So we look to the superintendent to put forward people that they recommend for future, to continue to teach, right? And that is based on the evaluations that the principals do, that then work with the superintendent. So we are not, we're not privy to, their evaluations. Those are personnel issues. I think the expectation is that if Jean is managing the district as we expect her to be, she is putting forward teachers that fit the criteria of what we look for a successful teacher in the district. And if they were not, then they would not be on this list. So I don't see that there's any reason why we as a board have to approve this then.
Beth?
It doesn't state that in there?
It is Maine state statute. If you were to refer to the MSBA handbook, it
Okay.
explains that this is the process. The superintendent hires, we are electing the teachers, but it is up to her to hire them. So we are giving her permission to hire them.
Or continue their
Or
contract.
to continue their contract.
So why don't we
that is-
refer to
we
them
are-
as first grade teacher, second grade teacher,
Oh, okay,
rather than
because I
putting a name
misspoke,
with
because
it?
these are teachers, these are already teachers. So I'm talking about, I was misspeaking for when we're hiring people, but it's the same process. We have to elect.
Seems like the board should vote on the
Michelle,
position, not the person.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just have a point of order about debating back and forth between members.
Yeah, okay. So, so this is specific to, I mean, the process of hiring new teachers, I think it can be a discussion for another day. Maybe we could get some support from either MSMA specifically around that procedure. But this is for continuing contract. So I understand if you're not comfortable voting in favor of that, and that is your prerogative. But we have a motion, we have a second. Do we have any other, Mara?
Yeah, I'll just say that I'll be voting in favor because I feel like I'm comfortable with the superintendent's recommendation, and I know, I mean, maybe Jean, you can speak to this, but our administrators are really the ones who have direct contact with the teachers. So, and I know they observe them teaching and do classroom observations, and they are the ones who do their evaluations. Is that right? So it's, and then they're giving their recommendation, I presume, to you that they would like to keep these teachers on.
Yes, so we have a very, as you know, a very robust supervision evaluation system, and our principals are supervising, evaluating all these folks, and along the way, there are touch points with me along the way as part of my monthly supervision meetings with our administrators. Mm-hmm. I'm asking, you know, is there any more we're concerned about? How are we doing? So I know those things along the way. They do a thorough written evaluation, and I read every single one of those as well, and would reach back without any with questions. And I have the utmost confidence that the names you see here this evening, they were thoroughly supervised and evaluated. They did a nice job for us this year, and I would like to continue to employ these individuals next year.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, we will take vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Great, thank you. All right, so we will move on to the three new additions to item 14, so for personnel. I'll start with, do I have consideration and approval, motion for consideration and approval to employ a director of facilities for the 2023-2024 school year? Maddie and Mara, thank you.
Hey, this evening I present for you Mr. Glenn Reynolds. Relevant experience is Glenn was the Director of Facilities and Transportation in MSAD 52, the Director of Operations in RSU4, and is currently the Director of Buildings and Grounds in RSU2. References describe Glenn as hands-on, professional, reliable, having a great relationship with staff, upbeat, knowledgeable about facilities, and works hard to make sure everyone feels valued and respected. And Glenn is actually, he has made the drive to be with us here this evening. He's in the back of the rooms.
So this was one of the, as an administrative position, this was one that was a committee of, I'm not sure how many folks. It was a fair amount. Yeah. So 20 candidates for interviewed. So I think, you know, the process was well vetted. So I know there have been some questions about process and how these are going through. So I just thought I'd start with that. Any comments, questions? Maura?
I just wanted to thank Glenn for joining us tonight, and it was a pleasure to meet him.
And just as a reminder, so everyone recalls, because this is a piece of the new split position. So this is just the facilities portion of that previous position. So, any other questions, comments? All those in favor? Great, none opposed. Welcome, Glenn. All right, so moving on to 14C, do I have a motion for consideration and approval to employ a director of transportation for the 2023-2024 school year? Susanna, thank you. And Kelly?
This is going to be a familiar name to the board. It's my pleasure to nominate Mr. Jeremy Arsenal. Jeremy's recommendation, he's been the mechanic for the town of Freeport. He's been a school bus driver, a mechanic, and he is currently our interim transportation director right here in RSU5. References describe Jeremy as a team player, professional, organized, reliable, a multitasker, a knowledgeable mechanic, and approachable. And I will say, as his current supervisor in his role as interim transportation director, I can attest to Jeremy's strong work ethic and his commitment to RSU5. I wholeheartedly put my trust in Jeremy's abilities to continue to lead the transportation team department well.
Questions, comments?
And Jeremy is here too, not to embarrass him.
Maura?
I have to thank Jeremy. So I'm really excited that we're hiring these new administrators, and thank you for joining us tonight.
All right. All those in favor? Great. None opposed? I would welcome you, Jeremy, but you're already here, so welcome officially to your position. All right, 14D, last one under personnel. Do I have a motion for consideration and approval to employ a kindergarten teacher at the Moore Street School for the 2023-2024 school year?
So I present Olivia White. Olivia has a BS in early childhood special education. She has certification as a K-3 elementary teacher, and also certified birth to age 5 teacher for students with disabilities. Relevant experience, she's been a grade 2 teacher at Holton Elementary School and is currently a grade 3 teacher at Holton Southside School. References describe Olivia as upbeat, professional, having excellent follow-through, knowledgeable, resourceful, welcoming, patient, an innovator, an advocate for students, and understanding of developmental needs.
Questions, comments? All right. All those in favor? Opposed? Great. Always look to Cynthia to make sure she got it written down. You're good? All right. We will move back to our originally scheduled programming and jump back to number 8 on our agenda, report from the superintendent.
All right. Item number 1, district happenings. I'd like to announce the Region 10 students of the quarter, Joseph Smith in general trades and Donald Erickson for English and social studies. Congratulations to those students. Another district happenings, if you recall, around this time last year, maybe in June, the board had a presentation from some leadership, students in leadership at Freeport High School doing some Cortico work. They have continued doing some of that work regarding student voice, and I've asked Principal Gulko to come up and tell the board a little bit about that work that she is doing with those students.
Good evening, everybody. Jen Gulko, principal of the high school. So originally, we had hoped that the student leadership members would be here tonight to be able to share some of the work that they've been doing. They are still in the process of what they're working on right now, and so they weren't quite ready to present all of their findings, but I just wanted to share with you what their next step in the process is. So as we started last year, we have a student leadership committee, and the members of this committee have the charge of enhancing student voice at Freeport High School and also taking action steps based on the information that they collect. All of the students on the team last year and this year have been trained by a partner that we work with named Jennifer Chase, who works for the Source School, and she also is a graduate student who is working on her doctoral program in conjunction with some other graduate students at MIT. And so Jennifer has worked with us for the last 2 years to train the students, to have them be ready to lead these student-led conversations, and then work with them to code the data. So for those of you who were board members last year, the students shared with everyone on the board their process, which was conducting the conversations. They record the conversations. All students who participate have parent permission to be a part of the conversations. Then they are working with the data lab that's at MIT to help them learn how to code the data. What's amazing is that all of the work that we've done with MIT has been, their time has been donated to us, which has been just outstanding. So it's pretty cool. We meet every Friday for the last 2 years, and I'm a part of this group and help to lead it. And we have been on multiple Zoom calls and workshops with people from MIT. And then there's a woman whose name is Maggie, who's a doctoral student at MIT, who has come to Freeport High School 3 times so far. So we're also really excited that on Monday, MIT has set up a field trip just for our school and for some students from Mars Hill who are working on something similar. And I'll tell you about that in just a second. So the work that the students did last year was getting student voice more in general about school culture. What are some of the things that are working or not working at school? That's the data that they presented to you last year and to the faculty. Then this year, what they have done is trying to take the data from last year and dive into it more deeply. So from there, they created 3 subcommittees. So one was on mental health, one was on microaggressions, tied to thinking about equity and inclusion at school, and then also policies and procedures. So those are the 3 committees that they have. Then they were trained again because we have some new members on the committee this year, and they conducted student-led discussions earlier in the year, recorded those, got the data, coded incredibly hard as members of this team. There's all 4 grades represented. Some students, as I said, have been doing this for 2 years. It's a little hard with some of our seniors right now as they have 1 foot out the door and they are really trying to finish this project this year. And so I'm especially proud of those students. They're managing their senior projects, trying to stay motivated, which we know is hard at the very end, and also keep up with this work. So just wanted to share with you a little description of where we're going on Monday. And this is what I shared with parents. Students on the FHS student leadership team will meet and learn from MIT graduate students and researchers in the Center for Construction Communication within the MIT Media Lab, as well as staff from Cortico AI. Students will share their own work from this year's FHS student leadership projects, which used technology that was developed at MIT and benefited from workshops provided by MIT graduate students and staff at Cortico AI. Another student leadership team at Central Aroostook High School and Mars Hill will also be in attendance, offering opportunities for students to network with other Maine school leaders. And what's unique is that it's only for our 2 groups. The MIT has set this up, which is wonderful. They even are providing parking for our vans, which I was especially grateful for because I used to live in the neighborhood with MIT, and I know there's nowhere to park an 8-passenger van. So as I said, we're very proud of this work. There's still more to improve in the way that the methods that we're using and how we're sharing this data. The timeline is one thing. We're feeling really crunched for time and knowing that when we do this next year, we need to back this up so that they have ample time to present to who they want to much sooner than the very end of the year. I don't know if you want me to field questions or you want me to...
I mean, if we have a quick question, we could go down a huge
know you
rabbit
have
hole
I
on this
know.
because I remember the presentation last year and it was fantastic. So maybe I'll say we'll just wait for their full presentation. But does anybody have any sort of high level questions for Jen on this?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to number 2, resignations. Grace Anderson, custodian, Moore Street School. Michael Barini, Ed Tech 3, Freeport Middle School at the end of the school year. And Elizabeth Grace, Pownell Elementary School teacher. And number 3, retirement. I'm announcing the retirement of Maurice Mo Fournier, bus driver, longtime bus driver in Durham, and we wish him all the best in his retirement. That's the end of my report this evening.
Great. So we will move on to number 9, administrator reports. Peggy.
Good evening, everyone. Well, the Finance Committee met tonight prior to this meeting, so you will have the minutes in one of your upcoming packets, so you'll have that. And we do have some good news on the audit front. I spoke to the...
All right. So board meeting comments and committee reports. So board information exchange, agenda requests. Maddie?
It's the loud mic, so I'm afraid of it.
Oh, we have 2 loud mics now because she's got the new one too.
Yeah, I don't like this mic. Stop giving me this mic. I'm loud enough as it is. I just wanted to, just because we've got a lot of new board members, and I know we have a lot of people that watch, and I just wanted to comment that our business meetings represent a mere fraction of the work that it takes to run a school district. This is the governance portion of that work. So when we come here and we discuss things in brief, sometimes not so much brief, it's just a little bit. It's oversight of our superintendent, whom we've hired to run the district, and her team. It's tough with having people come and go. It takes a while to kind of learn this job, but I just want to point our new members to the policies, which are all online, or anyone who's interested. And if you look at the B policies, there's a whole bunch of them. They talk about school board governance and operations, and those are very helpful in sort of learning how to run a meeting so that we can, and how to be in a meeting so that we can be as efficient as possible and get our work done so that our kids can go to school. And another thing that I'm not an expert in this, but I know we've had previous board members who've gone and become experts in Robert's Rules of Order, which is the way that we engage in a meeting. It's really helpful to understand how that works and why that works. It makes what would any meeting, if you've been on a booster club or anything, they can get really cumbersome, and it's really helpful to have rules of order that sort of keep us focused and able to do the massive amount of work we're supposed to do in a short amount of time.
Thank you. So those B policies that Maddie was referencing are the ones we, if we printed out all the policies, they would, I don't know, be big. But those B policies are the ones that we printed out and put in the binders that all new board members get. So we try to isolate those for folks so that they have them hopefully right at hand if they need them. So, other comments, questions? Maura?
I should probably know this, but do we have like a cheat sheet? I still have this from before. It has some of the Robert's Rules of Order. I feel like I might leave here getting tasked with doing this, but do we have a cheat sheet for this?
I mean, you've got the paper, so.
I mean, it's a book. Maybe I could copy this and it might be helpful. It's just like a brief little synopsis, because that book is like a little thick. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad idea. I mean, to Maddie's point, Lindsay Sterling comes to mind as our best Robert's Rules guide. But yeah, so maybe we can share that with the board. All right. Kara.
I want to thank Tegan for reminding us that it is Staff Appreciation Week, and I just want to give a very public thank you to each and every staff member here in our district who are keeping our students safe and growing and learning every day. So thank you very much.
Well said. All right, so strategic communications. Who's doing that one? Is that you, Candy?
Hello. Okay. First of all, to let you know that the workplace satisfaction survey has gone out, and deadline, I think, is May 15th for it to come back. And the Strategic Communication Committee has set a couple dates where we will be looking over it and helping with gathering all that information together. And the board will be getting that sometime in the fall. It's going to take a while to do all of that. Okay. And at our last meeting, we began to talk about communication and community engagement. Looking at constituents and what are our strategies for communicating. We seem to hear that there are people out there who'd like to know more about our system and how can we better communicate. We're doing a lot now. Each school sends out information. We have a website. Jean is doing the forecaster. We have Facebook and their email blasts and whatnot. But looking at more ways that possibly we could communicate, and we would take any suggestions. In fact, when we talk about our August retreat, that's one of the things that will be on the agenda, is talking about communication and community engagement. How can we do even more than we're already doing now? And another thing that will be on the August retreat is looking over the strategic plan again. It's time to review it and, make any adjustments, that kind of thing. That really is pretty much. We did talk a little bit about the migration, which you have in here, and the percentages have stayed pretty similar to the years, and the migration for students. Some of them are homeschooled, some are going to local private schools, some to religious schools, and some to Pine Tree Academy. And it's pretty much the same, year over year. Not much difference in the percentages. Last year it was 18.97% of students.
Was that at the last meeting, or okay? Any questions for Candy or the Strategic Communications Committee? Thank you. Yeah, I was in the central office not long after the staff satisfaction survey went out, and apparently there were responses coming in fast and furious. I think she had over 100 within the first couple days. So yeah, great. Hopefully you have a nice big pool to. Yeah. Sounds like we've got some kids at the high school who might be able to help you guys code it. And all right, policy committee update.
Actually, I think I started that a little early. So we met. Whenever it says that we met most recently, the only thing we're bringing to you today is BEDH. We wanted to act on that pretty quickly. Of course, there's been a lot happening with that at the state level as well. So coming around to you right now is an update from what you got in your packet, because there have been some recommendations from the attorneys in education, specifically around what we spent a fair amount of time discussing last time around whether to allow people to be mentioned by name. And the strong recommendation is that we not allow comments about people, staff or students, positive or negative. So the updates that we've made, and I've got Cynthia on standby because I'm guessing you'll have questions. So the updates that we made were, if you go, so on page, I just sort of just went straight ahead into this. Is this okay? Okay.
Oh, hold on, I gotta flip the page.
I think she says she transitioned.
Do you want to do a motion
I
first?
have a motion for consideration and approval of second read for the following policy, BEDH, public participation at Board of Directors meetings? Beth and Candy, thank you.
Okay, so more discussion. So if you look on page 1B, that did not change since what we brought you at the last meeting. But on page 2, H is different. So we put, it's difficult. So we put something back in that had come out, which is that first paragraph of H.
That's correct.
Why does this look different than what I have?
So you
Okay.
should have the revised, it should say
Yeah.
revised on the top of your paper.
Yeah, it does.
And the last time it came to came here, it was different. So you always go from the original, and then you make the changes to the original. You're
Yes.
not seeing last times, right, in this one. So that's why it looks different to you, Maddie.
Yep,
Does anybody
sorry.
have the one from last week, just so we can see what so there's essentially 4 versions. There's the current version.
The current version.
There's the last meeting version. There's the packet version, and then there's the revised version. Yeah?
Yes, the revised version. The last week, we had taken out discussion, right, that first part, the one that's underlined, discussion of matters involving. We had that in there, and then it was asked that we take that out because of the student portion. And then there was more legal advice about why we should not be discussing either good or bad with students and staff. So that's back in there now. And then the second part, there were 2 separate paragraphs. They're actually, it was 1 paragraph, but we had separated them into 2. So what you're seeing right now in the revised version that starts out with the no complaints crossed off, those were actually just 2 separated paragraphs with some changes in them. So everything is essentially there in those 2 paragraphs, but the original one had it all together. So the original one had said no complaints or allegations, right? Like all of that was there. The changes that we made were we crossed off that first sentence, and then where it says personal matters or, those are just flipped, complaints or personal matters. It was just flipped for more emphasis to be the other way. And then just a rewording of that second sentence. And then we added in a reference to a way for anybody with public concerns or complaints, even though it's referenced at the bottom, that was asked of us at the last board meeting to add that in so that people right there could go to that policy and see what the procedure is. Even though it's referenced on the bottom, it's embedded there for more emphasis. So is that clearer?
Mud, yeah.
Okay. So basically the essence of the changes are that, no staff or student their names should not be brought up at public comment for any reason. If there's a complaint process, if there's a complaint about a staff member, there's a process for that and how to do that. And then the earlier one is that the public comments during a special meeting that's called for specific topic would be, the public comments should be pertaining to whatever that specific topic if an extra special meeting is called. So those, in essence, are the changes.
Okay, so basically, we're back to 1 bullet, because the last meeting had it split into 2. So we're back to 1 bullet that reads, discussion of matters involving individual students and or staff are not permitted during the public comment period due to privacy, confidentiality, and due process rights. Complaints or personal matters concerning students or staff must be referred through established policies and procedures. And then the reference to the...
Correct.
I like that. I think that's pretty clear. Ben.
I'm wondering if we want to take out the word discussion from this entirely and replace it with comment or comments or commenting, because it isn't an opportunity for
That's true, it isn't a discussion. Yeah.
And that might help clarify things.
Comments of matters involving individual students and or staff.
Comments about. Well,
but if this is specific to public comment, which we clearly say is not a discussion, it's a comment.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. That's an easy word. Switch.
Yeah, it's in there more than once, so it'd be worth looking at that.
Yeah. Ben.
I just failed to mention this at the first reading, but I think that we just need to give as much opportunity for public comment as possible. I think that it behooves us as the directors or the school to listen to the constituents. And I mean, we work for them. So, and I understand that there are rules for sure for that, but I think that every opportunity, and in fact, it should be of paramount importance that we make it as simple and welcoming as possible. So while we're creating these policies, I think we should keep that in mind.
No, for sure. And I think that's one of the reasons we added an extra public comment onto our agendas, right? So we have one at the beginning, we have one at the end. We're not required to do that. That was a choice on our part because we heard some feedback that some people want to speak before we talk about something, so we know their thoughts. And then we also heard people kind of want to be able to have the opportunity to speak after they've heard us discuss something, right? So we as a board made the decision to add another public comment opportunity for folks. So I completely agree, and I'm sure the strategic communications, who's trying to figure out community engagement, would agree that, you know, the more opportunity, the better. But we just have to keep it within the bounds of our meeting. Yeah, Maddie.
And we also have, you know, when we do the budget, we add that particular opportunity for public comment on the budget in the middle of the meeting.
Right,
So
yeah.
I think we do great on that front.
I keep turning my mic off right in the middle of my conversation. I'm not sure why I do that. Other comments or questions about the revised policy for second read? Kara.
I know we talked a bit last time about the opportunity to provide positive comments as well, and I think that we're in agreement on how this is worded and what we're trying to do. It gives an opportunity, or refers to a policy for people to share their complaints, but it doesn't refer to how they can share their positive comments. So I don't know if that will eventually come back around to strategic communications and community engagement, but I don't know if what we would add in here for how people would share their positive comments.
Yeah, that's a good point. We tell them how to, if they have an issue, concern. Susanna.
I'm just wondering, not necessarily as tangential to this policy, but we've spoken last year. I know, I'm sorry. I'm trying to be high school spirit today at my event. We had spoken about this before with public comment about about publicizing or making it very obvious how people who give comment can get feedback based on that. So they give us, you know, whatever thoughts they have and how they know that we've heard them discuss them or whether we have anything we want to share back. And we'd spoken about making those processes public and shared. And I was just wondering, there still seems to be, or at least I'm hearing still some question about that and whether that's something that we can make sure that those are as transparent and publicly available as possible.
So have we created a policy for that circle back? I mean, obviously
that was part of the question, but we also were talking about putting it in documents because there are some practices that we have currently, and just
like
making
replying
sure
to emails, that kind of.
Well, that, and even saying that, you know, this, I mean, it says here, this is not really a discussion. This is, you know, you come, but we had sort of tried to, or spoken about solidifying how public does hear back from us. And so I just didn't know what the status of that is.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
What the status is that. Ben.
So right in the policy itself here under G, it says members of the board of directors and superintendent may ask clarifying questions of any person who addresses the board. So when I tried to ask Mr. Ledger about this policy, you guys shot me down on this, but clearly it's part of the policy of the board to ask these follow-up questions.
So you could have asked me the question,
Okay.
at which point I could have clarified.
But it says members of the board of directors.
Questions must be addressed through the chair.
Ask clarifying questions of any person who addresses the board or expected to refrain from arguing. Questions must be addressed through the chair. Okay, so I need to ask you to ask them.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's a good shout out because that's not typically how we've done it, so. But it is in there, you're right. All right, other comments, questions on this one? We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, okay. We already voted.
You voted
Just
in favor,
did,
Ben?
Did we need to amend it to say with the changes recommended from comments to discussion, from discussions to comment?
Generally, those minor ones, we haven't amended the motion because we haven't changed the sort of the spirit of the, it's more just cleanup. But. Okay. So, it's like the shortest thing on the agenda, unfinished business, cost sharing discussion. So, as you all recall, we had engaged, well, we've gone through a few steps this year around the cost sharing, around trying to get people some information so that they feel like they have a base of knowledge or a foundation where they could really process some information from the outside consultant we hired around reviewing our existing cost sharing formula and how it has worked historically, and are there ways to consider adjusting the cost sharing formula if the board felt so inclined. So we had that first step back in the fall with the Cost Sharing 101, and that package is in your, it was in your folders for this week. So that was just the presentation that the Finance Committee provided to you guys October, I think. Does that sound right? Yes. Maybe later? I don't know. Time blurs. Back before the holidays. And then the other package you have in there is the presentation from Suzanne Bowden, who was the consultant that we hired who previously worked for the Maine State Department of Education. To review our process and analyze the cost sharing information from formation to date, analyze the potential components to use in a cost sharing formula, development of possible formulas, the analysis, and then the presentation she provided to us at the beginning of February. So we wanted to circle back with the board now that hopefully folks have had some time to sort of process and think through all of that information, to say, where does the board want to go from here? But I guess we can start with if anybody had, as they were reviewing the information in their package, did anybody have any questions that we can help clarify? Hopefully help clarify. No promises. Tegan is taking questions. No questions. Wow. Okay. Someone has a thought. I know they do. Yes, we'll move beyond questions to thoughts. Thank you, Kelly.
I really like the idea of switching over to some formula that involves percentages, simply because we're in a district with a wide variety and large spread of people counts and valuations. The valuations in Freeport are pretty broad, and they are much higher than the ones in Durham and Pownell in general, but we are seeing larger increases in the student counts from those two towns than we are from Freeport, and that may not stay the same as we move into the future. So it would be nice to see a formula that more reflects and can shift along with the changes that we may see in the future in those three towns. As I was looking at the three possibilities that that our consultant presented to us, I liked the idea of some formula that has more emphasis on pupils and a little bit less on fiscal capacity, simply because of that spread in Freeport. Some people have very high valuations and some people don't. And they are generally much higher than the ones that you see in the other two towns. But pupil counts are rising in the other two towns. So just to kind of hopefully make it a little bit more equitable, it seems like something that would put a little more emphasis on pupil count and a little less on fiscal capacity might be something to consider. Also, based on the EPSs we have currently, the 35-65, 35 pupil, 65 fiscal capacity, numbers that you might see on page 18 of the presentation that was shared with us are very similar. The percentages turn out to be pretty similar to the current cost sharing percentages that we have right now. So this very moment in time, at least, it wouldn't be extremely painful for us to move to something like that. So something to consider.
Other thoughts? Really? She originally had 45 minutes. I'm like, we need at least an hour. Maybe we need 45 seconds. I guess maybe I will open the question of, how do people feel, maybe not about what a specific formula should look like, but what is sort of the temperature of the board around, do we want to change it? Or are we comfortable with the formula as we have it that has, according to everyone we've talked to, including Suzanne Bowden, held up remarkably well as things have changed over 12 years, 14 years. Wow, 14 years. Maddie.
Because it's such a behemoth to understand pairs.
Yes, Colin.
Yeah, and I suppose just following up on how Maddie put it, I think that shifting from a place where we are explaining to ourselves and to the public why we have kept the thing that we started out with, and shift to a place where we have, at a particular moment in time, chosen a particular approach, and then are able to again communicate that logic. Again, it still will mean that 5 years from now or 6 years from now there still will be, or 100 years from now, when you are on the board, that there'll still be this moment where we'll have to say, well, why did we do that? We'll still have to go back to another point in time, but it will not be going back to a point in time at the founding of the RSU. It'll be going back to a point in time where it was under review, with outside consultation, and further discussion. And you're going to live to be like 155 years old, just so you know.
And you're still going to be on the board. Sorry. You should be retired, but no, you'll be on the board. Okay.
I just want to support what Maddie and Colin have shared. I agree with that. Having a clear explanation, and also thank you, Kelly. I feel like you explained that really well. Her recommendation was to have something that would allow for flexibility, and I think that the 35%, 65% option would allow for that, and is pretty close to what we're doing now. Though I'm not tied to the 35%, 65%, so I'm open to discussion on that.
Yeah, I think if sort of the board is feeling the will is to look to a change, I think we need to understand how her numbers were calculated, because I'm not sure if she based it on our RLC as in our formula, like in our existing plan, or if she did it based on the state required local contribution, because as you guys may recall, there is a difference between those things. So, you know, just sort of the concept of, you know, a variable with those two, you know, parameters that we're looking at, two variables that we look at in the, you know, formulation. You know, then we could do a little bit more digging on what does it look like, what are the details, lots of spreadsheets. Yeah, so the two ways, we'll just throw this out there, that the formula could be changed, and when we undertook this project several years ago, the board felt strongly that it should be a board discussion and decision, and our reorganization plan allows for that. It requires a supermajority for approval, so 2/3 of the population. So not just 2/3 of the people present at the meeting, but 2/3 of the total population of the RSU represented on the board, and every town has to have at least one board member present, to avoid, you know, to provide that safety valve if there was some, you know, I don't imagine anyone's trying to jam anything down anyone's throat, but that's the safety valve that's built into the plan. So that's what that would look like. The other alternative is to send it to a referendum vote in all three towns. I would probably not advocate for that choice, just given the complexity of, you know, how hard we've worked to get this board to a point where you feel capable and adequately informed to delve into the numbers and understand it. I think that would be a huge undertaking. And for me, you know, the first and foremost is, you know, I'm not opposed to a change to the formula to try and make it a little more easier to understand or flexible to change over time as the demographics of the district change over time. But I'm not willing to take that risk at the risk of, or take that road at the risk of ripping apart the district for, you know, potentially unintended, you know, miscommunication or misunderstandings across, you know, 12,000 people. You know, I would, given the plan is upheld pretty well, I would be more in favor of keeping what we have before we took that on, because I see that being at least a year-long process of education and planning, and but you know, that's just my 2 cents on the process piece of it. But I just wanted folks to know what, if there was a desire to change, those are kind of our 2 avenues to do it. Maddie?
I feel confident that this board is productive and collegial enough that we can do this at a board vote level. The first way you described.
Yeah. I'm looking at Candy. She looks like she wants to say something.
I guess I agree on a couple things. I certainly agree with what Maddie just said. And, you know, we've lived for a while with what we've got now. And it was, in some ways, I would hate to see us put it out there and have some big to-do again about all of this. That's my only reaction.
I do think it might be something to consider for us to end up with a formula that looks a lot like the one we currently have in terms of the numbers. It will be, I think, a little bit easier for people to swallow if it's not a large, if it doesn't end up being a large change percentage-wise.
Yeah, right. Because I mean, I think sort of it's like a compromise, right? If everybody's a little unhappy, it's a good compromise, right? If somebody's super excited to have something changed, then maybe it wasn't fair to somebody else at the table. we spent a lot of time in this process the first time around talking about, you referred to it as equitably. We referred to it as what is fair, right? We talked a lot about what is fair. Like, what does fair mean? What does fair mean in this situation to these towns, to the, at this table? And, I think one of the things that has come out of having Suzanne come is that I think our existing plan at its core is fair. But there is something to be said for ease of understanding. There is something to be said for changes with changes in the district, right? So if we're not trying to slice the pie in a completely different way, but we're trying to solve for understanding and flexibility, then maybe we're, that's an easier conversation. So then the next question, I guess, is does everybody want to come with their own proposal? Like, what are folks thinking in terms of, what does this process look like? Beth. I know what Beth does not want it to look like.
I was thinking a little bit more about that and thinking that when the Finance Committee was charged with finding a formula before to present a couple years back, or more than that. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. When the Finance Committee was charged before, they were charged with, I guess they weren't really sure whether or not the board wanted to change or not. And so it was presented as a change, and the board, a majority was like, wait, no. So I'm wondering if now, even though I was sort of like hesitant to say, oh, the Finance Committee, but if that we are all on the same page, or majority that we do want to change it, then maybe that would be something I would be okay with the Finance Committee, like trying to, if we're all in agreement, I guess. That's sort of where I'm thinking.
We were just talking about how we can change our mind during these meetings. And Beth clearly has. Which is great. We're open-minded. So our plan does have, it has the logistics on how we would change the plan. It also has criteria that we have to consider if we're going to change the plan. That's in your Cost Sharing 101 formula or package. So the required criteria around fairness, the effect, right? The clarity, the consistency, and the effect of the method on the stability of the RSU. I think that a lot of that speaks to what Kelly's saying about, we don't want this to completely rock the boat on how it impacts people's taxation. I guess this might be assumed, but I think anything we do is for the upcoming the budget we're voting on in 2 weeks, with the information we have, that any potential change would not apply to that. It would be the following year, and the consultant's recommendation would be to phase it in if, over a couple of years time span. So just so folks don't think this is any sort of bait and switch that we put out this budget and then changed how it's going to get divvied up. This would be something that would be in the following year if the board made that decision. But maybe we can look at what are the criteria, and what are some I guess we love straw polls. By love I mean hate. So are most folks feeling that they would like to see an adjustment that kind of varies with some version of a pupil count valuation? Yes, you can say a thing or two.
I think that, I think Suzanne very helpfully in the recommendations just does there are three, right? It's like consider establishing cost sharing formula that adjusts for changes in fiscal capacity and pupils for each municipality from year to year. Utilizing that's number one. Number two, utilizing a combination of percentage of resident pupils and percentage of fiscal capacity would provide an equitable method of sharing the additional local costs. So that's two. And then three, should the RSU choose to move forward in changing the cost sharing formula, it would be prudent to phase this change over a 3 to 5 year period. So yeah, I would propose that if we were to send it to the Finance Committee, it would be with sort of those very specific recommendations to say, okay, given those three things, or do we agree that given those three things, the Finance Committee should take a look at it, run some of the numbers, as you said, look at exactly where Suzanne was getting those numbers, and look at, as you said, with the criteria and with the questions of fairness, how would it proceed, being able to adjust for those changes, and then again going through the three different models, and perhaps there's a different one in terms of the different possibilities of what the mix might be. But I think following her recommendations would be kind of the clearest way for us to sort of send it from the board to the Finance Committee and then know what we're getting back.
General consensus there? Maura?
Well, so just a clarifying question. So is the board looking then for a Finance Committee recommendation? Because I'm a little worried about that.
Yeah, I would say that maybe we come back with a couple of different scenarios that we think, meet the criteria that they've provided, and then we could sort of hash out any specific details as a board. I will not be providing a recommendation on paper this time, sorry. Ben?
Is it not already divvied up by percentage? I mean, we look at the pupil count versus the total contribution on page number 5 per town, and it's almost to the penny.
Well, I mean, I think
So-
that's the idea behind it's already pretty fair, the way it's done. But they are static percentages that were put in place at the beginning of the RSU that have never changed. I think the way we budget and the way we are consistent across our district keeps those numbers in line, such that on that page, that's why if the board said today, we understand this, we see all this, we think that what we have is adequately sharing the burden, and we're happy with what we have, I would not be opposed to that, because I think it does. I understand some reasons why we might want to change it for simplicity and flexibility, but I don't inherently think it's unfair today, to your point that they do pretty much match up. So, Kelly?
Yes, I also agree with that. I think the reason why I would be in favor of changing is simply because although it may be fair in this moment in time, I think it would be very fair for it to be a responsive formula that may shift according to changes in our district. But I was going to actually ask, if the Finance Committee comes up with recommendations, is there a process by which we as board members can kind of feed ideas or suggestions or comments to them to consider in their calculations?
I mean, my phone's always open. I mean, people are welcome at the Finance Committee meetings. Those are always publicly posted. You could go that way. You could email, you could call. We could share ideas that you want us to take into consideration in any number of ways. I'm going to go to Colin first.
Yeah, I think also just given Maura's hesitancy or contribution, I think maybe even further refining the ask of the Finance Committee to say to run the 3 pages of possible formulas through. In other words, there are 3 pages of possible formulas of different ways of breaking it down. Sort of using those as a way to sort of test that against fairness, test that against the other criteria, and come back to say, again, not to necessarily recommend one or the other, but to come back and say, given the criteria we have to consider, and given the questions of fairness, here's some notes. Here's some ways that we can sort of call attention to those three different breakdowns, and understand kind of why we might lean this way or why we might lean this way. So again, we're not putting that on the finance committee, but we're giving ourselves as a full board deeper information with which to make that final decision.
Yeah, I envision it being, the board can run, or the finance committee can run scenarios without the recommendation of, which one, that could be the discussion of the board. Maddie.
Just appreciate that your phone is always open, and really appreciate board members' willingness to make suggestions to the committee. I think that's great. Just want people to be mindful that committee meetings are, even board members may attend as guests, but may not weigh in by comment unless invited to do so, which typically is frowned on.
Yeah.
In order to keep committee work focused. That's all of our committees. Just wanted to make that comment so people understand that process. And then just a question or concern. I think it sounds great. I like the direction we're headed. I'm concerned about how much time it will take, because, elections keep happening and people leave and new people come, and then this continuous re-education process really just eats up a lot of time. I'd love to be able to check this box. I may not be able to personally. I'm realizing that that's probably not going to happen, but I would like the board to be able to check this box within a year. Would be great.
Oh yeah, you and me both. Beth.
Gosh, I guess my brain is not working tonight. I'm sorry. Just thinking about. Okay. I'm gonna have to stop. I guess I can't. I think
A year is a long time. I was thinking like a month, but maybe that's too optimistic. I feel a little torn. I mean, I like data and digging into the data, and I feel like that's important. And I also feel torn between doing a lot more work and maybe just choosing one of these options based on the information we have. So that's one thing that I wanted to make a comment on. Because of, like Maddie said, I feel like it keeps getting extended and extended. And I feel like we've had a professional weigh in and gotten these recommendations, and the percentages and some of the things other folks have said seem to align. So that's the one thought that I had. And then the other thing is, if we do dig into the data, I guess I'm wondering what options. I feel like I want to get more information about what the board wants us to do, but like the board doesn't want to give us more information about what the board wants us to do, and you'd like us to just go with it, but I'm going to ask anyway. I feel like you could sort of have a spreadsheet that goes all the way down to 100% valuation. You're already there, and 100% student count. And I feel like maybe that's what Suzanne has already done, and maybe she went to the one and found the options in the middle where it kind of wouldn't be too drastic of a change that it would be really painful for any single town in the RSU to try to absorb that change. So I'm just kind of wondering about that, and if it's, because like intuitively I want to say, oh, 50-50 seems fair because it's both of them, but then I know that could be quite a drastic change for some towns, and that one of our criteria is the ability to raise funding for the RSU. And so just seeing maybe that across those options might be helpful. But again, I feel torn between doing a lot more work because I like data and facts, and just wanting to proceed.
Yeah. No, I think that's always the dilemma, right? Where's the balance? I don't see it being a year, but I think a month might be a little aggressive. Since we literally have 3 board meetings left this year. We have the 3-town meeting where we don't have anything like this on the agenda, and then we've got the 2 in June. I mean, I guess my thought would be, we can work on creating that stuff to bring back. in September. So, because if we are going to make a change, I think we want to do it early in the year before the budget process starts, would be my preference. So I don't feel the need to rush it because it's not going to impact anything until the following budget year. So I think we want to do it right and make sure we give you all the data you want, Laura. And, you know, we need to refresh our brains about, you know, why some are some way versus the other, right? Like the majority of districts do 100% valuation, right? That's the fact. The fact that we're looking to do a mix is a recognition of who we are and who we want to be and this district. But I'm just cautious of saying things like 50-50 because I think that is kind of way outside the realm of possibility. But I've obviously looked at these numbers for a long time, so. But okay, I talked long enough for Beth to remember. There we go.
I was wondering if it would be helpful for the board to vote that, like, if we had a vote, not necessarily tonight, but that to just either keep or change, so we have like a solid forward motion, that if anybody else, you know, is coming in that we're already voted and moving forward. Is that something that's possible or I don't know, it's just a thought.
I guess it would depend on what the change was, whether I'm in favor of keeping or changing. Okay. I don't know. That could be.
That's fine. I was just.
Could be a very ambiguous answer. Sorry. Yeah. Colin.
I mean, I guess just to Mara's point about a quicker decision versus gathering more data. I think it's perfectly reasonable, since we still have a certain amount of time left in this meeting, in this designated time, to get a little more granular on, like, what are we actually asking the Finance Committee to consider in each of these different scenarios. To just say, like, well, what are we actually asking? Because I think
clarity is
I
never.
will contribute
never,
that Michelle flagged early the question of, you know, just if someone's writing anything down, of just like there are lots of pens, of like, you know, where are the number, you know, which numbers did Suzanne use to generate this to generate these breakdowns? It seems like that would be a very helpful thing to understand. Is there anything else that we actually need to know?
Right, and honestly, how she did it is less important than what comes out of it, because we can tweak the numbers to get to where she was, depending on, you know, which, because if she used the RLC versus our plan required local contribution, right? I'm guessing she used our plan required local contribution based on how these numbers are coming out, because for those of you that recall when we did this a few years ago, where the numbers were pretty similar to what we were doing at the time, it was an 85-15, right? So it was a higher valuation, but it was coming up with the same answer, because I think they were doing it based off the state 8279 required local contribution. So, you know, I want to know how she did it. And as long as we're all clear on what the basis is, then we can run those scenarios. Might not look the exact same number that she has on hers in terms of 25-75, but it might result in the same effect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it does seem like you're suggesting that in addition to understanding where she got her numbers from, it's also the Finance Committee doing some sort of evaluation of which should we be using.
Yeah, I guess she didn't really tackle that.
That's sort of in what you're. I think that's in what you're saying, is that it's, and to say if there's some sort of general consensus either as a board or as a Finance Committee that we generally like the terrain of these percentages or sort of the breakdown, and you're saying that, well, we could look at where she was getting the numbers from and try to arrive at that. I think, again, just being clear, I guess then a specific ask of the Finance Committee would be saying, why are we using those numbers? Like, what's the equity of that? Or how is that in keeping with our requirements for following the criteria? So that's two things. Kara's raising a pinky.
Just her pinky. Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm following, but she does refer to ED 279 in her calculations and says that she recommends using that because it buffers any large increases from year to year.
So that's based, that's based on the valuation.
Right.
The valuation from the ED 279, and everybody uses that as the valuation. And the reason she says it buffers is because it's an average of 3 years. So that I think we all use the same number on. I know there's so many. there's a lot of, we call things the same thing. We definitely haven't helped ourselves.
Is maybe one more thing, number 3, the Finance Committee were to come back and say, well, what if we phased in on 3 years? Or what if we phased in on 5 years, and how that would work? Because I think that probably would also be something that would be, again, something that might, for example, I think I know right now that I would be much more inclined to support something that was phased in over a number of years rather than something that goes into effect the following year. So I don't think I haven't heard a counter suggestion to that, but I think just having again, the Finance Committee come back and say, this is what a 3-year phase-in would look like, this is what a 5-year phase-in would look like. Again, not necessarily a recommendation, but just what that would look like.
How it works.
Yeah, and just what where that would show up, like on which spreadsheet would that show up on
Right,
the
because it's easy to say, just phase it in. You're like, well, no, how do the numbers work? Like, how do we send out that through, communicate that to the idea of how we keep people understanding what we're doing? Well, this year it's a quasi, anyway, Kelly.
I don't really have anything to say. I was just thinking out loud or thinking internally about how smaller changes might require or might be less painful over a shorter period of time.
Right, yeah. I think, long phase-ins are required if you're materially changing the impact, right? If we're not materially changing the impact or really at all, there's always some minor tweaks when you change any variable, but if you're not materially changing the impact, is it easier to just get it done? But, yeah.
I suppose the other question just on that is just whether or not the way this would be implemented would be using the previous year's numbers, or whether, again, I think there's some sort of delay. I know there's some sort of delay in some of the other calculations that we do. I'm not remembering exactly which right now, but in other words, I think it's maybe for student count. Is this accurate?
So those are done on October 1st, right? So next year's subsidy is based on last October 1st student counts.
Right.
And honestly, that's probably the best. That's right off the ED 279 in terms of simplicity. My recommendation would be to do the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's how most people do it.
Just being clear with ourselves about what data points are we using,
where they're coming from,
and so that. Again, I think it would be unlikely that there would be huge shifts from one calendar year to another calendar year in terms of pupil count or valuation. But again, to just recognize that might be possible, right? If there was a...
Yeah, and she may have mentioned that in there around, because the valuation is already sort of buffered in that it's a 3-year average. The pupil count is not. So you could see a big swing, as we've seen, in a year, if we didn't do some sort of average on that as well. All right, Finance Committee, feeling good? Mara will be back tomorrow with the information. Beth's never coming back. All right. All right, well, worst case, we'll have more questions for you guys when we sit down and start digging into it. So one of my takeaways from the last roundabout with this was communicate often and ask lots of questions. So, Maura.
Well, so I don't know if this is a road we want to go down, but this idea popped into my head. Do we want more than the Finance Committee to be involved in this? Like, usually when we create a special committee, we invite other folks to the to that It's just a thought. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea.
Who are you thinking?
Like community members, for example.
No.
Okay, I rescind my comment.
I mean,
I don't know.
In the spirit of education, I mean, I could probably count on this many fingers how many people I think have the amount of information we have about how this process works. So if our goal is sort of expediency in any form or fashion, trying to get community members up to speed would be limiting.
And I guess we don't necessarily have access to the folks who were involved in developing this that would have that, like, that had already been, that were there when the RSU was formed and engaging some of those folks. It's probably...
We talked to them. We talked to them during the last time to find out. That's how we figured out how it was done the first time. There are still some folks that are in town. None of them showed much interest in jumping into the fray.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, well, I think we can just rely on, if the community wants to give input, then we have public comment.
We have public comment.
We are
and we
here
have
and
an
we are
open
listening.
email.
Yeah, great.
That we are always willing to read.
Sorry
and
for the
take
terrible
into-
idea.
There's no terrible ideas. There's very few terrible ideas. No. I mean, it's a good question, right? Like, should we open it up? But I mean, I don't know. That's just my take. If the rest of the board wants to invite people, then who am I to say no? All right. Oh, that's why Cynthia keeps wandering back up to the microphone. She thinks we're going to be done, and then we keep talking. All right, so obviously there's no vote on that, so we will move on to 13, new business.
Okay, good evening again. So you have a memo in your packet. It's lace lime green, and it's for consideration and approval of the comprehensive education plan.
You are coming across very quiet.
Oh, I am?
Yes.
Oh, that's unusual. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just scooch down here. Maybe I can. All right, that will work, I think. Okay, so y'all have your, do you want to do a motion? And then I can get into the details?
For consideration and approval of the comprehensive education plan. Colin. Susanna, thank you.
Okay. So your memo just summarizes, I think I'm going to give you a little bit more information than I have in the last couple of years because of a lot of new people, and then just a reminder for others in case you've forgotten. So we legally have to have from Chapter 125 a comprehensive education plan. There are about 25 or 6 sections in there. It's housed in my office. It's a big binder, and basically as policies, procedures get updated, grants and so forth, then I work, at least a couple of times a year. I'll sit down and review it and replace and update the documents that we have taken any action on during the year. So so I bulleted them below. So out of all of the 25 sections, these 5 sections that are bulleted are the ones that have updates on them. So this is an annual process. And for the 22-23 school year, I did get a communication from one of the board members asking me about 3 of them. She says, well, I know that, the first 2 bullets we did because we passed those policies this year. So one section is affirmative action. Those policies were updated during the school year. So the plan now has the most recent version of those policies. LEP and the LOU plan, that multilingual learners, probably earlier in the year, it seems like a lifetime ago, but it was not very long ago, that those 2 policies were updated. So the question that I got was, we're voting on this, and I don't know what is the special ed plan. So first of all, I want to invite anybody that's a new board member, if you haven't come by, if you really want to see what it looks like, you can come, just make an appointment with me, and you can come and sit with me, and I can just kind of go through the binder with you if you have that deep interest. So it's there for anybody to view. but I don't lug it around with me. So the special ed plan is updated. It's basically a chart that contains all of our required reports. There are probably, I don't know, like a dozen reports that are required each year in special ed. And so the report is actually online at the DOE website. And so it's printed off and updated in the section that it belongs in. And if we didn't have them updated, you know, we would be getting information around that. And Jean would also say, you know, where's that? They would say, where's that report? So we always keep up to date on all of our reports. So that's the special ed plan. Vocational education plan. So there's a cooperative agreement with Region 10. We know that we send students there, and Brunswick and MSAD 75 all send students there. So I should have updated it last year. You can see the revised version was November of 21, and I must have missed that. Or what I do is I communicate with the secretary over there and have her send that to me. So I have it open on my, I have opened the email. And I can just tell you quickly what the pieces are of that report. It's not very long. There's a preamble, a purpose, what's the purpose of Region 10, how the Cooperative Board of Directors is made up. It talks about our voting power, and that was what one of the adjustments were to that plan this year. For example, they look at population and how many votes. Brunswick gets like 381 votes, MSAD 75 gets 364, RSU5 gets 253. So that was one of the pieces that was updated in the revised based on population. And then they have a section around administration and their cost sharing, the budget, and any amendments that they've done. So I hope that gives you enough information around what's contained in that. And if you want to see it more in depth, it's printed and it's in that binder. And then the last one is on this list every single year except the year changes. That's our plan of use for our ESSER funds. As you know, we get title funds each year. In RSU5, we get titles 1, 2, and 4. And so I write the grant that goes along with that. And this application, it's called an application, is printed out and in our binder. And next week you'll see when we have not next week, the week after, when we have our annual budget, there's always that budget sheet that says, here's the projected allocations for the new year. This is where we're looking to spend it. We do meet with a small committee of people to determine where those funds are going. But generally speaking, our Title I funds are supporting our Title I teachers in our schools and some supplies for their family nights. So every Title I school has a family night for literacy and for math. We generally will support that with books and other supplies for the families. And they go really well. I've attended several of them over the years. And then their Title II funding typically can go for a variety of things, but in RSU5, we've used those funds for professional development to help meet our reading and math goals. We also have to share some of those funds with our private schools, so there's an equity share, and I meet every year with our private schools, and we talk about, we have to do that, we have to have a consultation, and so we look at, here's where we're thinking, and they write their goals, and those also have to be approved along with our goals and submitted to the state. I'm probably telling you way more information, but I want to kind of educate you because I don't know how much you all know about what's involved in that application process. And that's something that I take charge of. And then I also do the performance reports for that. So in a nutshell, those are the items that have been updated thus far this year.
Thank you for the question, Kara, because that's more than I ever learned.
I think,
was it Kara? Was it you? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for taking the time to explain that. And thank you for having an open door for us to come in and have some light reading opportunities. I'm just wondering why it's not something that can be emailed to us, or that is on our website. Is it?
Because I think it's a compilation of a bunch of different documents.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all the policies are all on the policy page of our website. I don't think we have the cooperative agreements on the website, but I'd have to check with Ginny and see if it's somewhere on there. It is very dense. It's not like, so the 5-year and 10-year facilities plan, like those are like real, like, come see it and then ask me the question again. But
So-
just call me to make an appointment if you want to come see it. Yeah.
So so all of this makes sense. I mean, I know we update this every year. The one that jumped out at me was the cooperative agreement for Region 10.
Yes.
I guess my ask on something like that is that would be a great one for, how often is that updated? Is that like 5 years?
Yeah, so I have the dates right. Hold on, I'll just pull it up. It says it right at the top. So prior to this, it was 2016, and then prior to that, it was 2015, 2011, 10, 9, 9, 6. So there's not a real rhyme or reason to it.
Okay. That might be one that's,
I could email that to everybody easily.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just saying sort of going forward, that might be one that the board would be interested in seeing when it's happening, particularly when things like, vote counts are changing and, and it's not necessarily something you would need to bring. Maybe the members of the board that sit on that committee, on that board, the Region 10 board.
Makes sense.
I'm guessing they're aware of the cooperative. Maybe that's a bad assumption. Do you guys talk about the cooperative agreement at all? Yes. You do? Yeah, okay. So maybe that's a good one to bring back to the full board when it changes. Any other questions or comments on the comprehensive plan? Yeah, Kelly.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it would be easier in the future to make just a list of bullet points of the changes so that they're just easier for us to review quickly before we come to these meetings. Would that be possible?
Those bullet points are the changes.
Oh, I know, but I mean, but what has been changed within these documents, within the changes? In other words, you've kind of described them to us in standing up there talking, and I was just wondering if that was something that could be kind of made into a short memo or something like that.
Do you mean each of the policies, talk about each of the changes to the policies?
Well, the policies I think we all know of because we've all voted on those.
Right, yeah.
But things like, but I think it might be as simple as, the special ed plan that gets updated every year because we're swapping out the reports, right? It's not necessarily a change to our plan. It's we've updated the reports for the current information. I think that's what a lot of these things are.
Yes.
Same with the title funds, right?
Yes, those would be on there every single year.
So I think, the outlier is like the vocational school one.
Okay.
So maybe, just some.
Sure.
Yeah. Maddie?
It might even make sense to fold that into our update that we get from the superintendent. Maybe, quarterly, Cynthia could send to Jean what she updates us on in our
semi-annually.
All right. Are there questions, comments? All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor already. All those in favor? Great, not opposed. All right, we've done all of 14. We are back to public comment for the second time on the agenda. Same rules apply. We do still have some folks here, so if anyone would like to speak, we just ask you get up, say your name, what town you're from, and 3 minutes.
Good evening again, Anthony Pringle, Durham. I just want to revisit a couple moments ago and wanted to make note that I specifically appreciate the sentiment that was expressed that the board works for the public and that we deserve to have our voices heard in forums like this about topics like these. With that said, I do have 2 questions. Are there any forums where the public comment on policy is not solicited? And do time limits prevent individuals to comment outside the 10 to 15 minutes allotted if there are more than a handful of individuals that want to comment?
I'm going to ask you to ask your first question again.
Sure. First question was, are there any forums where public comment on policy is not solicited?
Any forum?
Like, are there any meetings held by this board where an opportunity for public comment is not available?
No.
Okay.
No, public comment is on every one of our meetings. The only time we would limit public comment would be if it was a special meeting for a specific topic.
Sure.
Public comment would be limited to that topic.
Okay.
And your other question is, it's really at the discretion of the board how much time we can allocate, because we, as you can see tonight, we have a long agenda that we have to get through. So sometimes, you know, we try to accommodate folks that come out to speak, but we, you know, if we had 200 people show up, we couldn't necessarily accommodate that. So.
Okay. Thank you. I believe Ben had a question.
Ben, yeah.
Michelle, thank you. Will you ask Mr. Pringle what is the policy that he's referring to that both he and Mr. Ledger spoke about?
I think he stated the policy was the transgender and gender expansive policy that's under creation. Yeah, it's being,
okay.
yeah,
All right, thank you.
So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify, I think you answered Mr. Pringle's question.
Yeah, so I did that because it was a process question. Yeah.
I think you answered in their board meetings always have public
Yes.
comment.
Yes.
Committee meetings do not.
Correct. Yes. I'm sorry if I misunderstood the question. So public board meetings always have public comment required by law. We have 2 of them. But subcommittees of the board do not have public comment opportunities. Thank you for the clarification.
Can I follow up?
You haven't used your full 3 minutes,
All
so.
right. It'll be a short question. The future Zoom meeting, I believe it's scheduled for next week on the subject that we discussed earlier. Is that going to be a forum for public comment?
No, that's a policy committee meeting.
So there will be no public comment on that?
Correct. So full board, public comment. Subcommittees, finance, strategic communications, policy, those do not have public comment.
Okay.
But we do have an email that goes to the full board at rsu5.org. So that goes to the full board. So if you had comments that you wanted any committee, regardless of which one it was, to consider, that's an avenue to get your thoughts out.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I think it really is in the best interest of the public that it goes down that way, because we want the full board to hear what members of the public are weighing in on.
Right.
It makes sense. So it's not an attempt to keep public comment from happening. It's an attempt to make sure that it's heard by all of your representatives.
Right, not just the folks that are considering the policy, in this case, that's being created. Right. So that's why public comment happens at the full board and the email goes to the full board. Yeah. Okay.
I'm wondering if this is an opportunity to share more about one part of the policy that we were reviewing earlier that spoke about discouraging duplication or repetition of comments, and that the board requests that groups or organizations be represented by designated spokespersons. Is that the idea of, like, if there are a lot of people who are coming to speak, and is there a way that we would encourage them to organize that?
Yeah, so we saw this. We saw this a bit with the reopening of schools with COVID. We really asked folks. I mean, obviously, we had a large group of people, honestly, on both sides that felt both ways. But we said, try not to duplicate the points that were made prior to you. So if you have something different to say, you can have the same thought process, or you can have the same eventual opinion on a decision. But we don't want everyone getting up and saying the exact same thing. It also helps, if people were to, we have received letters to the board that have been signed by a large group of people. So it comes from one person, but a variety of people are attached to it. I mean, obviously you want to make sure those people are on board with what you're putting their names to, but I think that's another way to let the board know that this isn't just one person who feels this way, to your point of, sort of congregating them all together. That's another option. So, yeah, it helps be a little more efficient that way too. All right. We have cut, well, not the end for you guys, but we've come to the end for the public. So do I have a motion for consideration and approval to enter into executive session as outlined in 1 MRSA section 4056F for discussions of information contained in records made, maintained, or received by a body or agency when access by the general public to those records is prohibited by statute? Maura and Beth, thank you. All those in favor? Great, not opposed. 8:31. All right, so we have another room around the corner that we can go to while they break down so we can be efficient.